Okay, this one hurts. Hello, my name is Lena and I really like books, particularly this book. This is Wicked by Gregory Maguire and I'm rereading it ahead of the alleged, hopefully, finally this time, film release of Wicked, the musical, the film. I love this book and I wrote my dissertation on it which is literally like more than 10 years ago now, which is sobering. But I reread it every now and then, and every time I reread it, I think, maybe this is the time that I'm too old for it, or I've read so much that I realise all of its flaws and I don't love it as much as I did. Maybe this is the time that reason or taste wins over nostalgia or pure unadulterated love, and I don't end up enjoying this book as much as I did. And every time that happens, I'm wrong. To me, this is a goddamn masterpiece, and it made me think a lot about the creative struggles that I've been having recently. I made a video, which you can watch up here, about how I'm trying to write a novel and have been for 7 years. And frankly, I'm just getting in my own way about it. I really get up in my own head. I've rewritten it several times. I've written like more than 100,000 words at this point of various points of the novel, and it just eats me up a little bit. And I started thinking about this book and how much I would defend this book against the most mouth-foaming, venomous of critics. And I thought it might be a therapeutic, creative exercise to read some of the most brutal reviews of some of my favourite books that I've ever read. Is this masochism? Maybe, but I think, and follow me through this process, I think it might also help me unlock some clogged thoughts in my brain, or at least give me a healthy dose of humility. Now, when you sign up to my newsletter, which I send out so infrequently that you probably won't even realise that you're signed up to it, you do get a free download of a reading list that's called Lena's Ultimate Books to Read Before You Die, All the Earth Does. So I'm gonna go from that original list, which I made a few years ago. I've probably got some other favourites since then, and I'm gonna see what the internet thinks of them. Starting with Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Let's go, come on. I think I'm going to use a combination of Amazon reviews and Goodreads reviews because I am a Storygraph girly, as I know a lot of you are, and I think that might be my best chance of getting out of my echo chamber. So let's go. Okay, the good news is only 7% of people who have reviewed this book on Goodreads have given it 1 star. The bad news is there's 44,000 of them. Dreary, sordid, uninspired. I eagerly bought Wicked, being a Wizard of Oz fan. Why is Wizard of Oz? Alleged book that exists. Wizard of Oz fan. Sorry, I'm not getting angry. Let's not get defensive, Lena. I eagerly bought Wicked, being a Wizard of Oz fan. I couldn't have been more disappointed in my life. This is a dreadful, long, boring, PC. I do think that people who use those two letters together, it's a little bit of an orangey red flag for me. Boring PC rambling of a fevered mind. If I could give it a minus star, I would. That's okay. I mean, it is long. Only boring people get bored, but it could be boring. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. 1 star. It never arrived. 1 star, awful. This book was awful and bizarre. After seeing and falling in love with the hit musical by the same name, I thought I would read the book. Now, this is actually a big problem with writing a fairly obscure book that you probably don't get paid loads for, and then getting offered a lot of money for the rights for it to be made into a more commercial product that ultimately has a different remit and a different goal, which is what Gregory Maguire did, and there but for the grace of God go I would probably do the same. But it does mean that because these two quite different artistic things are interlinked, the musical and the book, people go into one expecting the other, and ultimately I think that's maybe just like symbolically shows how artistically illiterate we all are, in that we don't understand the mechanics of the arts. But it is if you're going into the book expecting the musical, I can understand the disappointment there. I can. Although I managed to get to the end, boy was it a struggle. All the way through it was linked to some kind of bizarre sex. Box was having sex with a tiger. People started watching a random puppet show about a husband having sex with a mother and her daughter, and even Elphaba being male. I don't consider these plot spoilers, so I'm going to leave them in, but all of those things kind of do happen. Elphaba's sex is ambiguous. I actually think that's a really important, interesting part of the plot that the musical leaves out, and I think that it's really interesting. But again, if you're going into a piece of art expecting your moral values to be reflected, or not wanting to talk about the reality of how complicated sex is, then I kind of want to say that's a you problem. There's another review here that says, I rate this R for sexual scenes including bestiality, drug use and some violence. Books that are set in the real or fantasy world probably will have those things in it quite a lot, because that's what happens in the real / fantasy world. They really didn't like the dry politics and cringy sexual fetishes. It's not for everyone. I saw the musical in the West End a couple of years ago. It was a very good musical, which led me to the book. I wish I hadn't bothered. It was so bleak. We need happiness and hope. There is none here. Again, if you're approaching a piece of art expecting happiness and hope out of it, I think you have missed the point of art. It's nice when there is happiness and hope, but that's not a prerequisite. There are a few criticisms of this book being long, and there are some plot holes in it, which I don't think they're plot holes. I think those things are just aren't filled out in what is ultimately the first book in a series. So people are like, why is she green? And I'm like, they kind of explain that. Why is she allergic to water? Again, not explained in that book, but I don't think it needed to be. And it's, what this is showing me is that I think I come in with a lower bar than some people. I try and come in with less expectations on a book than I think some people are projecting onto it. So I can understand that, but you're wrong. Throughout the book, I kept thinking, get to the point, because I'm not enjoying this pedantic story. Was the author paid per page? There are parts of the book that are slower. There's one part where they spend a lot of time in a castle. Spoilers, but I won't tell you about it. That bit admittedly does feel slow. But I think what's also interesting about the criticism that a book is too long is often when you're stuck in a book that you're not enjoying, and for the readers who are really enjoying it, it's actually better for the book to be long, because they want to stay longer in that story and longer in that world, especially when it's a fantasy book. So yeah, a lot of people saying things that I don't agree with, but I think it's because they come in with different expectations to me. And then also that one woman who just never got her book. You have to remember that some people just don't desire to be pleased. That's not on their menu for the day. They can't have that on their bingo card. Being pleased. The next one I want to look at is a bit of a modern classic. It's Remains of the Day. This has been one of my favourite books since I was about 16, and I've reread this one a lot, so I know it well, but it's not one I recommend to everybody. I am like, this is kind of niche in the kind of patience you need for it, and also just like in the way you want to understand characters. It's a book for the patient, but it pays off. Why do I have a feeling that these Amazon reviewers are not going to be feeling patient today? Tedious and slow, long rambling narratives. I persevered with this as it gets great reviews. Boring, boring, boring. This one, my item arrived soaked, wet from back to front, and the colour is peeling off. Smells old and mildewy. I actually think that that is a great visual representation of some of the themes that are discussed in the book about things being old and mildewy, but I would definitely be a bit of a wanker for reading that deeply into this review, but I do think it's a little meta. That the book was mouldy. Tedious to read. The very detailed analysis of what constitutes a great butler was long and drawn out, only to be revisited to dissect a butler with dignity. I realised over time that I should avoid all books that have won or even been nominated for a Nobel Prize at all costs. This one. 1 star. Don't bother. Nothing happens. So many, okay, this is a great example. Okay, so many good reviews, but this is the life of an English butler. So mundane. So the point of Remains of the Day is that it's about the life of a butler whose job is slowly becoming redundant as the world modernizes around him, and he romanticizes about the past and his long lineage of butler family who have all served the great people in this house. And I think, as intriguingly, a missed opportunity at a love interest that never happened. So this is literally about thinking about the mundanity of a butler's life and how it is in service to somebody, what they're asked to stop thinking about and stop analysing, but how curiosity and unwanted desire and individual subjective conscience seeps in anyway, however much the role of a butler is trained to not be like that. So the kind of game when you're reading this book is to listen to the main character talk about his mundane butler life, but actually if you're listening you can learn a lot about his inner world and the kind of missed, salacious, sexual moments that he glosses over and doesn't notice himself, and the darker political stuff that's happening in the house that he tries to ignore because that's not his role. That's not his responsibility. He has to stay neutral and professional. So what's interesting, I think, and you might find this as well if you look up your favourite books, is that the criticisms are the things that you liked about the book and you feel are the point. They're not like little niggly things that people would change or mess with. Often it's actually the core of what makes the piece of art or the book itself is what people either don't get or just don't like. And that actually becomes kind of reassuring, because if somebody's criticizing me as a human and they're like, Lena, I just don't really like the way you chew, or I think you walk weird, that would feel a bit like, oh, that's, God, and I've been doing that all the time and it's so embarrassing. And but if somebody was like, Lena, I just don't like the fact that you talk so much and that you love books, things that are actually literally core to who I am, things that I would never plan to change. Lena, I just don't like the fact that you're 5'2". They're things I can't do anything about. They don't really offend me or annoy me because they're unchangeable, or in some cases, they're actually kind of the point. Okay, the next book I want to look up is a very contentious one. It's Sheila Hetty's Motherhood. And look, what I'm gonna say to you is that I am also a lover as well as a hater, in that I haven't enjoyed Sheila Hetty's other books. I tried How Should a Person Be? Do you remember what I was gonna say? I was gonna try and read her other books. I've tried to read How Should a Person Be, and it's not for me. I didn't like it. However, Motherhood remains one of my favourite books of all time. Even when I hear people criticising it, I'm like, yep, makes sense. So here we go. What the world, or at least Amazon customers, think of one of my favourite books. It's whiny, it's arty, it's self-indulgent. Sounds like my YouTube channel. Dragged myself through this as it was supposed to be good. Not sure I even remotely understood it. Wouldn't recommend. Oh, this book was new, but it had mud on the back. We really have to be more thorough about what we're reviewing here when it comes to books. Are we reviewing the physical object or the spiritual contents? There needs to be 2 columns. Ooh, okay, this one hurts. It hurts. A kind of literary Kardashian. Save your money. Self-indulgent, self-obsessed, middle-class person writes hundreds of pages of diary entries about herself and her boyfriend and calls it a novel. Tedious as fuck. I mean, it is hundreds of pages of diary entries about herself and her boyfriend. But it's not actually her, it's kind of a fictional version of her or her alter ego. It is fiction. But it's hard, right? Because if you want to talk about yourself and talk about your own experiences, it's only the context, I think, that makes that self-indulgent. It depends on whether somebody's asked it of you. Like, if you start talking to somebody at a bus stop about your personal problems and they feel like a hostage on their own little plastic seat, I would call that self-indulgent. Calling a lifelong best friend and saying, hey, do you have time for me to offload on you? And then talking about yourself for 3 hours with their consent, somebody who cares about you, I don't consider that self-indulgent. And where does the opening of a book that you have consented to and read the blurb of and read, where does that fall in that conundrum? Because I think that's closer to the, hey, let's set aside an amount of time for me to unpack what I'm feeling and thinking, rather than the bus stop hostage situation. No? I do think people who are self-obsessed are annoying, but I do think in this case, because this is an introspective look at whether a specific person should reproduce or not, there is a point where you kind of are taught so much as a woman to not pay attention to what you actually want and be real about the consequences of what you want. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to defend it, but I didn't find that book self-indulgent, although I have found other books like it and some parts of hers a little like that. Pseudo-psychological claptrap. This woman needs to get a real job. There's a book called The Art of Asking that talks about that phrase and unpacks this whole, like, the criticism is get a real job. But some of the criticisms in this comment are, you know, she doesn't like this part where basically the character flips coins and tries to see how she feels about the outcome to deal with the idea of, like, personal autonomy and how far that goes versus just running your life on random choices and, like, the randomness of the universe. Like, I think it's a really interesting point, but I understand that it went on for a long time, which I enjoyed because I was in it, but yeah, okay, fine. Some people have been saying it could do with a clearer structure. There was no coherent story. And again, they're things that, like, yeah, I get it. Maybe if I was editing the book or something like that, I'd be like, we could deal with some more structure. But I also found the aspects of that incredibly comforting because my thoughts on motherhood and reproductive choices and the burdens of the world expecting that from you and then wondering why you don't expect that from yourself and is there something wrong with you, all of that is quite a messy process to go through, and it almost made me feel better about my own brain farts around it because hers were also kind of scattered and, like, related and yet not related, and it would be hard for you to put some of her thoughts under one category or one chapter heading or one boundary because some topics are so messy that trying to sort them out into categories before you think about them messes it up more. Like, I think there's actually a better chance of you sorting out your thoughts if you realise how much the thoughts overlap. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Okay. That's enough internet anger for me. Okay, what can we learn from this exercise? I think for one thing, I struggle when I'm criticising my own work or editing my own work, thinking about what I would like to change about it, but then also trying to pre-think about what other people might want to change about it before I've even created it properly. You know what I mean? Before it's even baked. And the point is, if any of those reviewers had got their way and were able to time travel back to when the authors were writing the books and pointed out what they didn't like about them, and the authors took on that feedback and changed the things, none of those books would be my favourite books. None of those books would have had the impact that they have had on me, and they ultimately would have been a completely different offering. I also think that you have to assume that people are coming to your work in good faith. And if they're not coming in good faith, like they're not coming because they want to actually hear from you and how you're feeling, or they're not expecting toxic positivity from you, or for your work to perfectly match another similar work in a different medium, like Wicked the musical, then they're potentially failing as an audience member. They've either chosen the correct thing to attend or open or buy, or they haven't unpacked their own prejudices about what they're doing when they pick up somebody else's work. Like, if you're automatically assuming that you get to pick up a book that doesn't have death and messy human experiences like fetishes and drug use and stuff like that, if you're assuming that not that it shouldn't be labelled or have like a rating, but that shouldn't even exist or have been presented to you, that's weird. That's weird. And I can't be writing books for those people. I can't do it. I can't be spending my life writing books for people who don't read books in the way that I agree with reading books. Get it into your head, Lena. The internet has given us so much access to other people's thoughts, which can be really useful in this way. When you're worrying about whether to create something, look up the bad reviews of the things that have changed your life. Because even the people who are like intrinsic genius masterpiece people to you are somebody else's worst nightmare. And you could apply this to anything. You could think about people that you admire at work, or think about all the people who don't like your friends. Don't dwell on it, but it's good to think about in a moment. Think about all the people who broke up with the person that you're dating, maybe for the reasons that you like dating them. It seems on some level to be really, really simple, but actually kicking into your brain that criticism can be valid, but just not valid to you, that there's no way to control criticism, but there is a way to control whether you're criticised for the things you actually can defend and care about and were actually trying to do, or you get criticised for the things that you only put in there so that other people would like it. Them's the choices, them's the breaks. Thank you so much for watching. This video is made possible by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. Frog Snog out.